Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Steve, your back porch professor. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. We're having such beautiful weather out here in the Northeast. And you know, if you're Letitia James, you may want to enjoy the outdoors while you can. We have an absolutely mind-blowing development in the Letitia James saga, as you all know by now, this New York Attorney General who built her entire career on getting Trump, right? She literally campaigned on the promise that she would be the one who would finally bankrupt Trump with a fabricated charge that no one in the history of jurisprudence was ever charged with, right? Yet that very same New York Attorney General, she's now facing federal bank fraud and mortgage fraud charges of her own. And I kid you not, the legacy media's desperate attempts to save her have actually just inadvertently sunk her. The legacy media's pathetic attempts at gaslighting their rapidly dwindling audience just backfired spectacularly. I want to give a huge shout out to a fellow YouTuber by the name of Nellie Miranda, who first discovered this. She has a brilliant analysis of this on her own channel that you want to check out. She gets into it in much more depth, interacting with the investigative work of fraud investigator Sam Antar. But bottom line, according to this investigation, Letitia James owns a house in Norfolk, Virginia. Now, on her mortgage application to OVM Financial, this is back in 2020, she signed what's called a second home rider under penalty of perjury. So a second home rider explicitly states she will occupy the home as a personal residence and not rent it out. Okay, so this is a sworn legal statement, very black and white. But on her IRS Schedule E tax return, which is the specific one you file for rental property, she listed 0 personal uses for that Norfolk home. And she classified that very same property as generating rental income. That's exactly what a Schedule E is for. Now, as the fraud investigator pointed out, obviously these two documents cannot both be true. Either Letitia James lied to the bank to get more favorable loan terms, or she lied to the IRS about rental income. It's one or the other. One of these is federal fraud. It gets worse. You also have her insurance application, which describes the very same Norfolk property as owner-occupied, a residential property. But in her New York State financial disclosure forms, she calls it an investment property. So you literally have on these 4 legal forms 4 different legal designations. So it's a second home for her bank in order to secure a more favorable mortgage. It's a rental property for the IRS. It's owner-occupied for insurance. And it's an investment property in her New York financial disclosure forms. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. And again, according to this fraud investigator that Nellie Miranda references in her wonderful video, at least 2 of these sworn statements are criminally false. They can't all be true. Now, if you could believe it, it actually gets worse. On those same New York State disclosure forms that claim that the Norfolk home was an investment property, James reported the property was worth between $100,000 and $150,000. And yet at the same time, she also disclosed mortgages totaling between $250,000 and $400,000. So that's a loan-to-value ratio of up to 400%. Now, no legitimate bank on earth would issue loans at 400% of a property's value unless they've been deceived about what they're actually lending against. And again, that's where this gets stranger. When this fraud investigator pulled the title report on the Virginia home, he apparently found something quite odd. Those mortgages that Letitia James disclosed on her New York State forms, the ones that have a loan-to-value ratio of up to 400%, those obviously were not the loans associated with the property title. They didn't exist in the public records for the Virginia property. So when you get a mortgage, it gets recorded in the title report of your home. Take a guess which mortgage was recorded in the title report of her Virginia home. It was that original mortgage, that 2020 OVM financial loan for $109,600, whatever it was. That doesn't allow, it's attached to her home with a signed agreement that does not allow that home to be used for rental property. So she insisted on putting mortgages that appear to be more consistent with a rental property in her New York disclosure, but she hid the actual one that's associated with the property. Why would she do that? Now, this is precisely where the New York Times kind of stepped into it. 2 days after Trump's indictment, or the Pam Bondi's indictment, they wrote this pathetically pandering puff piece on Letitia James, describing her great niece living in that Virginia house rent-free with her children. And of course, we're supposed to think, oh, what a kind soul, what a wonderful, compassionate, caring person Letitia James is, right? I mean, the Times article, it was eye-wateringly embarrassing, okay? It read like a bedtime story, you know, the small, modest, little yellow house at the center of the firestorm or whatever. You know, all she's trying to do is provide shelter and respite for her family. But that single phrase, you'll note, rent-free, that the New York Times used, proved the fraud. If the niece lived there rent-free, as the Times reported, then James committed tax fraud by filing IRS forms claiming rental income. If James did collect rent, but didn't report as required on Schedule E, that's also tax fraud. And if she collected any rent at all, then the second home rider she signed for the bank, swearing she wouldn't lend it out or rent it out, is a fraud. So the Times tried to humanize Letitia James and ended up stepping on a rake in the process, accidentally disclosing or closing off any escape route she might have. Now, we'll have to see how the judge and jury handle this, but one thing's for absolutely sure. Letitia James prosecuted Donald Trump for allegedly misrepresenting property values on financial documents. This despite the fact that Trump's lender had no complaints, every loan was paid back in full, there were no victims. And yet, as it turns out, she was the one who appears to have actually committed bank fraud and mortgage fraud. She has an entire contradictory paper trail, all with her signature, with discrepant claims that cannot all possibly be true. Either the property was a rental property or it wasn't. Either the people living there were paying rent or it was rent-free. The evidence isn't confusing. It's her signatures, her sworn statements, her IRS filings. And the media's defense isn't journalism, it's damage control that actually ended up becoming a confession. Truth is truly stranger than fiction. My, oh my. Enjoy your weekend. Love you all. God bless.